It's the 2022 World Cup. It's Germany's players. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. And today we are looking at Germany's squad for the 2022 World Cup.
Yes, and this preamble is going to be the same for every mediacast we do for players. So those familiar with it can jump ahead to around 4 minutes when we begin to talk about the team. And the times for each section are at the top of the show notes. And for YouTube watchers, those include a timestamp, so you can click directly to go to that point.
For those looking for a quick version of this, you can skip to near the end of the mediacast, the last 10 minutes, where we summarize the likely starters. Just prior to that, with about 20 minutes remaining, we'll have some discussion on the squad, the main issues with the squad, their club affiliations, some stats, and an overview of new, injured, and outgoing players. We will also be editing this mediacast into a shorter version for those who are just looking for an overview.
Right, and for those looking for a deeper dive, you've come to the right place. We go through the players and how likely they are to make it to the final squad. We explain why we think so and give information on each player's history and standing with the squad. And the way we do this is first by organizing players into their designated position. So it should be noted that these are a bit artificial since players don't always play in their coded positions, but it's a good way to organize the discussion.
Then we go through the players and share some of the data we've collected in our files. And using that data, try to predict how likely the player is to make the team, based mostly on their recent participation. We categorize them into definite, likely, possible but unlikely, and seems to be off the squad. We also mention big players who have recently retired and make note of any who are currently injured. We finish by a quick run through of the squad again and try to determine which players will be starters.
Right, and for those following on YouTube, we run a very simple graphic where we list the names, and you can actually see the players' names in print there. And it's the same broadcast for the audio cast, so we're going to try to repeat the names a few times to help listeners become familiar with the players' names, so that you know who is stepping onto the field when a substitute comes in, for example. You can impress your friends by telling them what you've learned here.
That's as much as we can do at this point, but as the rosters are being published, we will do an update episode on teams and players. For the players, that will essentially be going over our predictions, updating them based on the games played to that point, and revealing which players were selected. So keep your eye out for those, probably in mid-November.
All right, now let's get on with talking about Germany. And we did a couple of podcasts on Germany. One before the Euro 2020 tournament, that was in the summer of 2021, actually. And we did their group podcast for the World Cup here. So we're going to talk about a couple of things that came out of those podcasts. How about you, Connor, there?
Yeah, so there's a couple of themes here which will be fleshed out after our player-by-player analysis. We want to introduce them here. So one is shocking lapses.
Shocking lapses, how intriguing.
Yeah. And then kind of related to that, Germany laps but don't lull.
Yeah, that was a little phrase I came up with in the writing. Do you like it, Connor?
I do like it. I think it hits the point. But yeah, we'll talk about what that means later.
Exactly.
And then finally, we have change of long-term manager. So we'll talk about that shortly. But that's Germany entering kind of a new era for this tournament.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, great. Well, we will come back to those after the player-by-player section of the podcast. But now we're going to move on to the formations that they've been using in the period we're talking about. And actually, the period we're talking about doesn't include the Euro Cup, but we're going to start with how they lined up in the Euro Cup.
Yeah, so in the Euro Cup, Germany had 4 games and played actually the same formation in all 4 of those, that being a 3-4-2-1 formation.
Right, and actually that would have been Joachim Löw's last time managing the squad, so the World Cup qualification would have been under the new manager.
Yeah, and that is reflected in the change of formation. Germany switching to a 4-2-3-1, so 4 at the back instead of 3, except for Game 7 where they did go back to a 3-4-2-1 that had been used in the Euro Cup.
All right. They played a couple of friendlies after that, friendlies against Israel and Netherlands.
Yeah, and we saw both formations here, both the 3-4-2-1 and the 4-2-3-1.
Yeah, and we typically expect kind of new players being tried out in friendlies, or perhaps even towards the end of World Cup qualifying if they've already secured their spot, which actually might explain the new formation in Game 7. And finally, we have the June games in the Nations League.
And there were 4 games, and they actually used each of the 2 formations we've mentioned already twice. So 4-2-3-1 and 3-4-2-1. So in summary, based on World Cup qualifying, you'd say the 4 at the back is the preferred system, but they have kind of proven flexible in between these two primary systems.
Yeah, I mean, a big difference really between 3 at the back and 4 at the back, but always just the one forward, hey?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, well, let's move on to talk about the squad then, and we'll begin with the manager. So we're going to just briefly talk about the outgoing manager, Joachim Löw. Do you want to take that, Connor?
Yeah, so Löw was the Germany national team manager for 15 years, 2006 to 2021. Reached his height, of course, during the World Cup success in 2014, but kind of results in form deserted him a little bit towards the end. But really, he must be kind of remembered as a good manager. He took Germany to many finals. Germany was very consistent. Again, faded a bit during the end of the reign, but he has that World Cup, so successful for sure. But a new era now.
Yeah, sorry, I hope I didn't interrupt you there. Yeah, and actually Germany was the only only national team he managed. He coached a few clubs in Austria and Turkey and Germany before that. But we won't go into too much detail on him because now the most significant name is Hansi Flick. And his name is in light gray, suggesting that he hasn't been involved in a tournament yet.
This will be his first major tournament. Though he comes from Bayern Munich, where he helped them win the UEFA Champions League. So big game experience. And yeah, he played in Germany for several years from 1982 to 2000, but didn't earn any international caps. But has kind of made his name a bit more as a coach recently.
Yeah, he was actually the assistant manager from 2006 to 14. So I guess that would be the first half of under Löw's reign. But then he went on, to Bayern Munich. Okay, so that is the manager, and we'll come back at the end of the podcast to talk about starters with manager. That's a bit unusual, but we don't expect Germany to change their manager prior to the tournament. So let's go through the goalkeepers, and we'll just begin by naming the players and the category they're in, and then we'll come back and discuss them in more detail. So we have Manuel Neuer as a definite candidate, Kevin Trapp as a likely candidate, Marc-Andre ter Stegen as a possible candidate, and Oliver Baumann as a possible candidate, and Bernd Leno as a seemingly off the squad candidate. So we'll justify those categorizations by starting with their recent participation. So Manuel Neuer started 9 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, and he was on the bench for one and injured for one, and not selected for two others.
Yeah, he's 36 years old, so he's getting up there in years. But he has been Germany's starting keeper for several years. He's also the starter for Bayern Munich, where he's been since 2011 after a move from rival Schalke.
Yeah, so he's been basically their goalkeeper since the start. The 2010 World Cup, he was the starter. He also was captain of the team by the time the 2018 World Cup came around. So the starter for 3 World Cups in a row and for the Euro 2020. So he should be the starter here. Kevin Trapp is a likely candidate. He didn't start any of the 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, but he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 10 of them. So just 2 matches that he wasn't selected for.
Yeah, it definitely kind of puts him squarely in the backup category. He currently plays for Eintracht Frankfurt in Germany, which won the Europa League last season. Where he moved from Paris Saint-Germain. So he was with PSG for 4 years from 2015 to 19. And he is currently 32 years old.
Right. That was his second spell with Eintracht Frankfurt. And he only has 6 caps since his start in 2017. Are you surprised by that, Connor?
A little surprised, especially given the affiliation with PSG. However, we know Neuer's being kind of the undisputed starter for so long. I think it's difficult work being a backup keeper in Germany, or has been over the last decade, really.
Yeah. Well, they sent their B team to the 2017 Confederations Cup, but he wasn't even the starter there. The goalkeepers we're talking about below started there, and he never has really played a game in a tournament, although he was on the squad for the 2018 and 2022 Euro Cups, but Manuel Neuer kept him off the field. All right, Marc-Andre ter Stegen we have as a possible candidate, even though he did start 3 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup. But he was on the bench only for 2 and not selected for 8 others, including the last 4 matches.
Yeah, and ter Stegen, he's currently the starting goalkeeper for Barcelona. He's been with Barcelona since 2014, moving there from Borussia Mönchengladbach. Yeah, 30 caps for him, and he's 30 years old.
Yeah, he's been with the team since 2012, but the Euro Cup 2016 was actually his first tournament. He was actually on the preliminary squad for the Euro 2012, but didn't make the final squad. And like Kevin Trapp that we talked about above, he's been selected for tournaments, but not getting on the field. So 2016 Euro Cup and 2018 World Cup, he was on the bench. However, for Euro 2020, he was having surgery for a knee problem, so missed out on that tournament. Oliver Baumann, getting his name into the mix. He first appeared on the bench actually in September 2020, but then disappeared for 21 months and came back just recently in June 2022. Didn't start any of the remaining 4 games there, but was on the bench for all 4, so kind of replacing ter Stegen there.
Yeah, he's 32 years old, but has 0 caps for Germany, despite his recent involvement. So he's not necessarily a young keeper trying to make his way in either. And he currently plays for Hoffenheim in Germany.
Yeah, I think I'd be a bit surprised to see him get in amongst this stiff competition here. Because even Bernd Leno seems to have dropped off the squad and seems to be a bit of a bigger name than Baumann. But Bernd Leno started 1 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup. He was on the bench for 6 of those, but then not selected for the last 6 matches.
Yeah, that could have something to do with his club form. He moved to Arsenal in 2018 from Bayer Leverkusen, but kind of fell out of favor towards the end of last season, so wasn't playing regularly. He's since moved to Fulham in England, so a smaller club, but he's getting regular game time. So perhaps that might change kind Hansi Flick's mind now that he's playing regularly again.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see the lineups or the squads in September for their late September games. As it is, his first cap was in 2016, and he was also selected for the 2016 Euro Cup, and also for the 2017 Confederations Cup. He actually started and finished game one, but then he lost his starting position with Marc-Andre ter Stegen taking over there, and he wasn't selected for the World Cup in 2018, but was on the bench for the 2020 Euro Cup. But as we saw, kind of dropping off the team now. So those are our candidates. Do you want to just run through them, Connor?
Yeah, so in the definite categories, and this is definite to make the squad, not necessarily start, we have Manuel Neuer. For likely, we have Kevin Trapp. For possible, we have Marc-Andre ter Stegen and Oliver Baumann. And then it seems to be off the squad, we have Bernd Leno.
Right, and actually we usually finish just with a summary of the positions. So it was Manuel Neuer all through the Euro Cup, and also in World Cup qualification games, it was Neuer. But Leno came in for one of those games, and ter Stegen started two of them. It was ter Stegen and Neuer in friendlies, and then back to Neuer for all four of those June Nations League games. So Neuer has pretty much held down the position throughout. All right, well, let's move on to defenders, and we're going to begin with central defenders. So as Connor said, this definite means definite to make the squad, but not necessarily to be a starter. We have Niklas Süle in as a definite, and Thilo Kehrer as a definite. Antonio Rudiger, a likely candidate, and Nico Schlotterbeck, also likely. Matthias Ginter, possible. Jonathan Tah, possible. And Matt Hummels, seemingly off the squad. And Robin Koch, seemingly off the squad. And maybe I'll just start, Connor, by asking how many do you think they bring to the Cup, central defenders?
4 for sure, possibly 5. I think the squads now are a little bit larger. So I would say probably knowing Germany's switch with sometimes 4 at the back, sometimes 3. I'd probably say 5, possibly room for 6, but it kind of depends if they can find kind of a versatile player who can kind of play, possibly in the middle, possibly out wide as well.
Yeah, I've been saying 5 or 6, but I'll actually have to check to see if I'm right in that. Anyway, let's begin with Niklas Süle. So he started 8 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup. He was on the bench for 1, out with coronavirus for 2, and injured for 1. So just 1 match that he wasn't called up for.
Yeah, Süle, he plays currently for Borussia Dortmund. He's been with the team since 2016 and has 42 caps in that time, and is 27 years old. So he does seem a pretty well-established member of that back line.
Yeah, he actually moved recently from Borussia Dortmund, or in 2022 at least, from Bayern Munich. So pretty good pedigree there. In terms of competitions, he was a substitute in the 2017 Confederation Cup. That was kind of a B team. And he managed to make the 2018 World Cup squad, appearing as a substitute there. And in 2020 Euro Cup, also a substitute there. So has never really made it into the starting lineup. And despite being definite here, 8 games out of 13 doesn't necessarily make him a starter. We'll take a closer look at that at the kind of in summary, though. Let's talk about Thilo Kehrer. He started 11 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup and was on the bench for the 2 others. But I should point out that he also played as a left back several times and even as a right back once.
Yeah, he moved to West Ham this summer from PSG. Who did start his career in Germany with Schalke.
Yeah. Okay, and in terms of tournament, just on the team since 2018, but hasn't made a tournament yet. So, but judging by the amount he's been playing, we do expect him to make this one. Moving on to the likely candidates, Antonio Rudiger. He started 8 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, was on the bench for 2 and not selected for 3 others.
Yeah, Rudiger has played with a number of big clubs. He started with Stuttgart, but then moved to Roma, then to Chelsea, and is currently with Real Madrid. He's been with the team since 2014 and has 54 caps in that time.
Right, and he is, 28 years old, I think?
Yeah, 28 or 29.
Yeah, 29, yeah. His first tournament was that Confederations Cup in 2017. So despite starting with Germany in 2014, he didn't make the World Cup that year, and he was injured for the 2016 Euro Cup. He actually did make the final squad, but he was injured, so it was replaced by Jonathan Tah, who we'll meet shortly. He was on the bench for the World Cup 2018. I believe he played against his brother in that tournament. Do you remember?
Rudiger, I don't recall.
Oh no, I sorry, I'm thinking of Boateng.
Right.
I'm way off base here. Okay, I'll just carry on. By the time Euro 2020 came around, he was a starter, so started all 4 games. If you recall, he was wearing a black protection mask in that cup, and looks like a likely candidate for this one. Okay, next is Nico Schlotterbeck, and including his first appearance on the bench in September 2021, so their first game after the Euro Cup there. He started 4 of their remaining 13 games to June 2022, was on the bench for 6 others, suspended for 1 and injured for 2, so he seemed to have been called up every time.
Yeah, a recent addition, like you said, just the 4 caps to his name. He moved to Borussia Dortmund from Freiburg in the summer, and he's only 23 years old. So, yeah, a newcomer in this back line.
Right, and so no tournaments under his belt. We'll move on to Matthias Ginter, who we see as a possible candidate, having just started 1 of their 13 games since the Euro Cup. He subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 4 others. Out with coronavirus for 2, but not selected for 5. And significantly, that included the last 4 matches in June.
Yeah, he's another central defender who made a move this summer within Germany from Borussia Mönchengladbach to Freiburg. Yeah, he's 28 years old and has 46 caps to his name already.
Right, and actually that's his second stint with Freiburg. He's been on the team since 2014, and he was on the 2014 World Cup squad. But he was just on the bench, didn't see any action there. Not a part of the 2016 Euro Cup, and in the 2017 Confederations Cup, he didn't appear in game 1, but started, got a starting position after that. 2018, just a substitute, but in Euro 2020, started all 4 games there. So worked his way up to being a starter, but hasn't maintained that since. We mentioned Jonathan Tah a little while ago. He returned actually after an 8-month absence in November 2021 and started 2 of their remaining games up until June 2022. Subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 4. And just 1 match he wasn't selected for after November there.
Yeah, he currently plays for Bayer Leverkusen in Germany, where he's been since 2015. 16 caps for him, and he's also 26 years old. So, yeah, relatively young in that defensive cast.
Yeah, and he did get his first cap in 2016. It was on the squad for this 2016 Euro, just on the bench there. He didn't see any field time. Actually, we mentioned he did replace Antonio Rudiger, who was injured. However, he has not made it onto a squad since then. Not even the B team in the 2017 Confederations Cup. And I'm looking for a reason that he wasn't selected. For the World Cup, he was on the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut. Otherwise, I just see that in Euro 2020, I have a note saying that his performance just wasn't up to the standard required.
Interesting.
Yeah. He actually started from 4 years of age, Connor, which is actually not that unusual.
Wow, with his youth club.
Yeah. Okay, finally we have Matt Hummels, and he actually seems to be off the squad here. Oh, it's not finally. We have one more after this, but Matt Hummels last appeared in the 2021 Euro Cup.
Yeah, a real veteran, 76 caps for Germany. He's been with since 2010, so through a lot of the successful years. And as a player, he actually went from Bayern Munich to Dortmund, back to Bayern, back to Dortmund. So switching between the two big clubs, but also two great rivals.
Yeah, that's right. Well, 34 years old, I guess, is at the upper level. So I'm guessing this is down to age.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we won't spend too much time on him. Basically, he was a starter, especially in the early years for the Euro 2012 and Euro 2014, and kind of on and off after that, but a part of World Cup and Euro 2020. Just started a few of the games in the World Cup and all of the games in the Euro Cup. So no, a firm part of the team there, but seems to have maybe retired, announced his retirement after the Euro Cup. I'm not sure. And finally, we have Robin Koch, who we consider seemingly off the team. He last appeared for the national team for the 2021 Euro Cup.
Yeah, the Leeds United defender has just 8 caps, and those were all achieved between 2019 and 2021.
Right, and his only tournament was the Euro 2020 Euro Cup, but he was just on the bench for that, so didn't see any action there. So let's summarize central defenders by talking about how the position has gone. So as we noted at the top, sometimes a three-man centre-back formation, and sometimes a four-man defensive line, which would be 2 centre-backs and a left-back and a right-back. So in the Euro Cup, it was 3 centre-backs, and they were Hummels, Rudiger, and Ginter. That changed a lot with the new manager coming in, and became quite complicated, actually, with Rudiger starting the most, Ginter only a couple of times, and Hummels not at all. Niklas Süle came in and played a lot in the World Cup qualification games, and then Kehrer started to take a bigger role. Schlotterbeck, Jonathan Tah, and even right-back Klostermann, who we'll meet soon, also a few starts. Rudiger and Süle seemed the most common starters, though, but we do see there's a lot of rotation in this position. All right, let's move on to left backs. And do you want to take us through the names there, Connor?
Sure. So in our definite category, we have David Raum. We have 2 names in possible but unlikely, and that's Robin Gosens and Christian Gunter. And then in seems to be off the squad, we have Marcel Halstenberg.
All right. Well, let's go back to David Raum, and we have him as a definite candidate because including his first appearance on the bench in September 2021, right after the Euros there, he started 7 of their remaining 13 games, and he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 4 others.
Yeah, he's just 24 years old. He started with Greuther Fürth in Germany, a smaller club, spent the 2021-22 season with Hoffenheim, and then moved to Leipzig in the summer. So yeah, his career kind of on an upward trajectory, and 9 caps so far for David Raum.
Yeah, 24 years old, so he's never actually been involved in a tournament here, but it looks like he will be involved in this one. Robin Gosens is a possible but unlikely. He started one of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, subbed in for one, but was out with 2 separate injuries for 5 games and not selected for the last 6 matches.
Yeah, he's actually spent his recent career in Italy, first with Atalanta and currently with Inter Milan, where he moved this summer. And he has 14 caps, all coming since 2020.
Wow. Okay. 28 years old, and his first tournament was the Euro 2020, where he was a starter, starting all 4 games, but didn't start at a left back. If you recall, it was a 3-man back line. So he pushed up to play the left winger role throughout the tournament there. Christian Gunter is also possible, but unlikely. He started one of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 1, but not selected for 9 matches, including the last 4.
Yeah, not a great sign. He's currently with Freiburg, where he's been actually since 2012, so some time. He's 29 years old, but has just 6 caps to his name so far.
Yeah, just 6 caps, because after his first cap in 2014, he was off the team for 7 years and just returned in 2021 before the Euro Cup, but actually was selected for the Euro Cup squad. But he was didn't see any action, just on the bench there, and actually only on the bench for 2 of the games. So we're not really expecting to see him in this tournament. And finally, we have Marcel Halstenberg, and he last appeared for the national team in the 2021 Euro Cup.
Yeah, the Leipzig defender, who's 30 years old, has just 9 caps to his name, so hasn't ever really been a regular for Germany.
Yeah, that's right. But he did make the squad for the 2020 Euro Cup. He appeared only in 1 game there, where he was subbed into game 2 in the 62nd minute. So those are the candidates, and we'll summarize the position here. So again, not used in the Euro Cup because it was a 3-man back line. Gosens started in that cup, but as a left winger. We'll talk about that when we get to left wingers. Gosens actually started the World Cup qualifying games, but Kehrer, who we saw as a central defender, started the next 3 World Cup qualifying games. Then it was Raum, then it was Gunter. Raum played in the friendlies, and Kehrer and Raum in the Nations League games. So when it was a 3-man backline, it was usually the left defender who did move up to play the left winger role. So Gosens did that in the cup, and Raum did it towards the end of the period we're talking about. So a defender moving up. All right, that brings us to the end of left backs. Let's look and see how things shape up on the right side. And go ahead and give us the candidates.
Yeah, so we have 2 who we think will definitely be part of the squad. The first is Joshua Kimmich, and the second is Jonas Hoffmann. In our likely category, we have Lucas Klosterman. And then in possible, we have Benjamin Henrichs.
Right. Okay, well, the first one is Joshua Kimmich, and I'll just point out that he was, not a right back in the Euro Cup, but he was the right back who moved up to the right winger role. But interestingly, after that, he moved out of that position and has been playing in central midfield under the new manager.
Yeah, and I think he played central midfielder when Flick was the manager of Bayern Munich as well, which is his club team. So yeah, possibly it's a position that he finds himself in now. That's middle of the park as opposed to right defense.
Yeah, interesting. Anyway, he did start 9 of their 13 matches in that central midfielder position since the Euro Cup. He was under quarantine for 2 matches and on special leave for 1, so always called up, which is why we have him as a definite candidate.
Yeah. He's been with Bayern Munich since 2015. He's just 27 years old, but has 70 caps already. So he's a real fixture in the national team.
Yeah, hard to believe he's just 27 years old, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
His first tournament was the Euro 2016, and he didn't appear in games 1 and 2, but he gained a starting position after that for the remaining 4 games. And he was actually part of the Confederations Cup 2017 team. He was the only player, in fact, only German player to start and finish all 5 games there. And he was a starter in the World Cup 2018 and in Euro 2020. So it looks like they always use him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so Joshua Kimmich. But again, we'll be thinking of him more as a central midfielder during this period. And perhaps that's why we have 2 candidates that are definite, because we have Jonas Hoffmann, who started 8 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup. He was subbed in for 3 and injured for 2 others.
Yeah, he's a Borussia Mönchengladbach defender. He's been there since 2016. But he's been with the national team since 2020, where he's amassed 16 caps in that time, and also scored 4 goals, which is pretty impressive given his position.
Yeah. 30 years old. He was on the roster, 30 years old, sorry, but he got his first cap in 2020, so a bit of a latecomer. But he was on the roster. He was on the roster, but not on the bench for any of the 4 games. A bit of an odd situation there, and I can't remember the numbers. I think they were allowed to bring 28 players, but only allowed to actually bring 23 or 25 or something to the game. So there were always a couple of players who were on the roster, but not even on the bench.
Yeah.
And as far as Hoffmann goes, he plays quite a bit in that right back or right winger role. But he has played as a right attacking midfielder as well. Let's move on to Lucas Klostermann, who we did meet earlier as playing in a central defensive role. That would be on the right side of the 3-man defense. And he started 3 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, subbed in for 2 and was on the bench for 3. And was out with 2 separate injuries for 3. So just 1 game that he wasn't called up for.
Yeah, that's pretty good. He's 25 years old and has 18 caps, and he currently plays his football with Leipzig in Germany.
Right. And he was part of the Euro 2020 squad, having earned his first cap in 2019. But he was on the bench only for game 1 and then out with an injury, a torn muscle fiber after that. And I wonder if he's a bit of an injury-prone player, because he's an injury risk for this tournament too, out with a ruptured ligament from mid-August, Connor. So a bit of a doubt.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we'll come back to that when we talk about the injury list at the end. But let's move on to Benjamin Heinrichs, who returned after a 17-month absence in March 2022 to start 1 of their remaining 6 games. And he was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for all 4 others.
Yeah, he's a teammate of Klostermann at Red Bull Leipzig, where he's been since 2021. He's debuted with the national team in 2016, only 7 caps in that time. Yeah, and he's 25 years old, so one of the younger players.
Yeah, he's been on the team since 2016, but was selected for the 2017 Confederations Cup, where he was just a substitute, although he did start and finish the 4th game there, but wasn't selected for the 2018 World Cup or the 2020 Euro Cup. So kind of on the fringes of the team here, Connor.
Yeah, I'd agree.
All right, well, let's summarize the position. So, again, the right back position is only used in those formations that have a four-man defense, which was about half the time. And in the Euro Cup, it was Kimmich in the position, although he pushed up to the right winger position. Actually, the right midfield, Baku and Klosterman, each got one game in World Cup qualifying, but mostly it was Hoffman. Hoffman is actually coded as a central midfielder, but we moved him to the right back to talk about him here because that's where he's primarily played. So he mostly played in the World Cup qualification games. Interestingly, attacking midfielder Julian Draxler came back to play, but it was in the right wing position there in the first friendly. And then Kehrer, the central defender, in the second. So all sorts of players playing in this position. In the Nations League games in June, it was Heinrichs once, and Klosterman once, and Hoffman twice. So in summary, it was Kimmich in the cup, but he moved to central midfielder, and then central midfielder Hoffman primarily played in the position, with other players being tried out in the position, it seems. Did you get all that, Connor?
Yeah, a little bit unsettled, I
Yeah.
think is what it boils down to.
Yeah, definitely. But I'm expecting it to be Hoffman in the cup, although he has played in the attacking midfielder role. And actually, that leads nicely into midfielders. And let's begin with defensive midfielders.
Yeah, so we have a couple players listed in the defensive midfield role. In the possible category, we don't have any definites or likelies. And in the possible category, we have Anton Stack. In possible unlikely, we have Julian Weigl. And then it seems to be off the squad, we have Emre Can.
All right. Yeah, so we'll actually do central midfielders too, and it seems to be central midfielders primarily who play the role. But Anton Stack, including his first cap, which was in March 2022, didn't start any of the remaining 6 games, but did sub in for 2 and was on the bench for 3.
Yeah, just a couple caps to his name. He's young, 23 years old, and he currently plays with Mainz in Germany.
Right. And I kind of think he was replacing someone when he came in there, but we'll perhaps shed more light on that as we go. Julian Weigl actually returned after a 5-year absence in March 2022 and started one of their remaining 6 games. He was subbed in for 1, but unlike Stack, he was not selected for the last 4 matches.
Yeah, he's actually with Benfica in Portugal, though he has been loaned to Germany, to Borussia Mönchengladbach for the start of the season. He has just 6 caps to his name since debuting in 2016.
2016, yeah, and he was actually on the roster for the 2016 Euro Cup, but not for any of the tournaments after that. So 2017 Confederations Cup and the last 2 tournaments. So as we said, he returned after a 5-year absence. So I'm not likely to make this tournament either. The last one is kind of maybe saying goodbye to a veteran here. Emre Can last appeared for the national team in the 2020, I'll call it the 2021 Euro Cup there.
Yeah, he has 37 caps. He played with the team from 2015 to 2021. Played on a number of big clubs. Started actually with Bayern Munich. Then also played with Liverpool, Juventus, and Borussia Dortmund. So some big clubs that he's been associated with. But like we said, it appears like he's no longer on the squad. He's not that old, coincidentally, just 28. But yeah, not involved with the national team recently.
Yeah, another player who I thought was a bit older, but in light of his being 28 years old, a bit of a surprise that he's off the squad.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't actually realize he was as young as he is.
Yeah. Well, rather than summarizing the position here, we'll move on to central midfielders and then summarize the position because these two overlap quite a bit. So do you want to take us through the central midfielders?
Yeah, so in our definite category, we have İlkay Gundogan. We also have Jonas Hoffman, who we talked about. He's in our definite category, but we discussed him under right backs. We have Florian Neuhaus. I'm actually have to confirm what category we have him under.
Oh no, he's a central midfielder.
Oh yeah, sorry. How have we categorized him?
Oh, sorry. Why don't I come back to it when we describe it? I forgot to mark it, but
sure. Yeah. In possible but unlikely, we have Maximilian Arnold. And then in seems to be off the squad, a big name in Tony Kroos.
Right. Okay. Well, I put Newhouse under possible for now, but when we read his description, we'll.
Sure.
And do you know if Kroos is retired or just off the squad?
It looks like he had announced his retirement.
Yeah.
After the 2021 Euro Cup.
Okay. Okay, let's go back and take a look at these players. So we'll begin with İlkay Gundogan. So he started 8 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup. He was subbed in for 3 and injured for 2 others, so always selected.
Yeah, he's with Manchester City in England, where he's been since 2016, moving from Borussia Dortmund. 62 caps and 16 goals for the 30-year-old. Pretty good return for someone in his position.
Yeah, well, he earned his first cap in 2011 and was on the roster for the 2012 Euro Cup, even though he didn't see any action. But he wasn't in any of the tournaments up until the 2018 World Cup. So injured for the 2014 World Cup and for the 2016 World Cup. It was a back injury in 2014 and a knee injury in 2016 and a B team in 2017. And on the for the 2018 World Cup, he appeared only in Game 2, where he replaced an injured player there. So he had actually been off the team for quite a while. And finally, in Euro 2020, he became a starter for the Cup. And I believe he plays upfield sometimes, more like an attacking midfielder too.
Yeah, pretty versatile player. Who's grown into a very important player for Manchester City and Germany as well.
I'll put Connor said we moved Jonas Hoffman to the right back position, so he didn't play as a central midfielder. So let's talk about Florian Neuhaus and nail down where we categorize him. He started one of the 13 games since the 2021 World Cup, and he was subbed in for 3 and on the bench for 4 and not selected for 5 others, including the last 4 matches. So to me, that sounds like a possible. How about you, Connor?
Yeah, I would agree with that, possibly even verging on unlikely, given that not selected for the last 4 matches.
Yeah, that's always a concern. But while you're describing him, I'm just quickly going to look him up because he may be an injury. I just want to see if it's an injury that's responsible for those last 4 matches there.
Yeah. So the 25-year-old, he has 10 caps for the German team, and he currently plays with Borussia Mönchengladbach. So one of the teams at the top end of the German table. And it looks like you do have a note that Neuhaus was injured for the September 2022 matches.
Yeah, no. Do you want to just do his tournament history? Because I'm looking it up.
Sure. Yeah, he was on the roster for Euro 2020, but he saw no action. He was on the bench for all 4 games, and that was the first tournament that he's been involved with. So just a brief little tournament history there.
Yeah, no, he wasn't injured for the June games, so I'm not sure what's going on there. I thought actually Germans were quite enthusiastic about him as a player, so maybe by the time we do our update podcast, we can say what happened with those June games, but it doesn't seem to be down to injury there.
All right.
Let's move on to Maximilian Arnold. And we have him as possible but unlikely. He earned his first cap actually as a substitute in May 2014, and then was off the team and returned after a 7.5 year absence in November 2021 to start none of their remaining games. Didn't start any of their remaining 8 games there, but he was subbed in for 2 and then off the team again for the last 6 matches.
Yeah, remarkable story. Arnold's just 28 years old and has just 3 caps to his name. He's currently with Wolfsburg, where he's been for basically his entire career.
Yeah, more than 10 years. All right, well, finally we have Tony Cruz, and he last appeared for the national team in the 2021 Euro Cup, and he actually did announce his retirement shortly after. So a big loss for them there, Connor.
Yeah, he's 32 years old, and he's still contributing impressively for Real Madrid. So it is a loss. There's no doubt that he still has the ability. But yeah, in his career, he's amassed 106 caps for Germany, 17 goals. And I think widely regarded as one of the top midfielders of his generation.
Yeah, well, we won't go through his whole tournament history, but basically, the 2010 World Cup was his first tournament where he was just a sub, and also in the 2012 Euro Cup. But in the 2014 World Cup, he really made an impression, being named to the team of the tournament, and in short, he was a starter from that point on. Okay, well, let's finish by summarizing the position of central midfielders. So regardless of the formation, we talked about the 2 formations at the beginning of the podcast. There are 2 central midfielders in both formations. So it was Cruz and Gundogan in the Euro Cup. And then, of course, Cruz disappeared from the team after the Euro Cup. Goretzka did replace Gundogan in the last game of the Euro Cup there. And with the new manager, we saw Kimmich moving into the central midfield after that. And he was the most regular starter there, but he did some rotation with Gundogan and Goretzka, who's actually coded as a left midfielder. Neuhaus, Weigl, and attacking midfielder Musiala all got 1 start in the position. So I would say kind of a rotation among Kimmich, Gundogan, and Goretzka, if I have to give a simple summary there.
Yeah, sounds about right.
All right, well, then we will move on to left wingers. Yeah, left wingers. Okay, and I'll explain why I got confused there. I'm actually doing wingers here before we do right and left midfielders. And the reason for that is because the winger role is almost always played by a defender, a left back or a right back, moving up into that position. Those who are coded as left and right midfielders generally play a more attacking role. So here we go with left wingers.
Yeah, and there's just one name, and he's in the possible category, and that's Marco Reus.
Possible, yes. Okay. Let's talk about Marco Reus then. He had returned after a 2-year absence in September 2021 and started 3 of their remaining 13 games, subbed in for 1, on the bench for 1, and injured for 4, including the last 3 matches, and not selected for 2 others. So just kind of not firmly established in the team during the period we're talking about.
Yeah, he's been with Borussia Dortmund since 2012, so a long-time player with them. 48 caps, 15 goals for the national team, but his career unfortunately has been hit with a lot of injury, which has affected his participation at times.
Yes, you're right. In terms of tournaments, that's pretty evident. His first cup was the Euro 2012, and he was basically a sub in that. He started one game, and then injury prevented him from the 2014 World Cup, and he wasn't selected for the 2016 Euro Cup. Made the preliminary squad there, but not the final squad. For the 2018 World Cup, he was also started as a substitute, actually, but gained a starting position for the second and third games. But then for Euro 2020, made himself unavailable, citing an intense club season beforehand. So injuries and his own decisions and all sorts of things have collaborated to make him a bit of an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, and he's the only candidate there. So we'll summarize the position, but I think I pretty much said it already when we were discussing the left back position, that Gosens moved up to the left wing in the Euro Cup when there was a three-man defence, and then the position didn't exist until the last game of World Cup qualifying. From then onwards, it was left defender Rome, playing as a left defender when the position existed, and generally moving up to the left wing when it was a three-man defence. So actually, I should add for Marco Reus that when he has played in his 3 World Cup qualification games, he was a central attacking midfielder rather than a winger. And he was out with torn muscle fibre for the June games, but he has played for his clubs since then. So again, injury part of the story with Marco Reus, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately for him.
All right, let's move on to right wingers. And who do we have, Connor?
There are none.
Oh, all right. Well, once again, I'll summarize the position then. As we saw, it was right back Kimmich moving up to the right wing position in Euro Cup qualifying. And Hoffman did so in the last game of World Cup qualifying, the only formation that had the three-man back line. And then it was always right back Hoffman when it was a right back position. However, Julian Draxler, the attacking midfielder, did play it once in one of the friendlies there. So let's move on to left midfielders. With Germany, that's a bit more of an attacking role, or the players coded as left midfielders tend to play the attacking role. So do you want to take us through those players?
Yeah, in our likely candidates, we have Leon Goretzka. And then actually just one more in possible, and that's Julian Brandt.
Okay. And in contradiction to what I just said, actually, Leon Goretzka was one of the players coded as a central midfielder who played a more defensive role. So we saw when we talked about central midfielders that he sometimes shared or rotated into that role. But we didn't talk about him on the central midfielder, so let's cover him here. He started 7 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, subbed in for 2 and was on the bench for 1, and not selected for 2 of the matches.
Yeah, he's 27-year-old midfielder who plays for Bayern Munich. He's been with them since 2018, and he has 44 caps and 14 goals, so a pretty good return for someone who's been with the national team since 2014.
Yeah, that's right. And even though he was with them since 2014, he didn't make the final cut for the 2014 World Cup, and also wasn't on the team for the 2016 Euro Cup. So the 2017 Confederations Cup was his first tournament, and he was a starter there and actually did very well, scoring 3 of their 12 goals in that tournament and won the Silver Boot Award there, and also the Bronze Ball Award for the third best player of the tournament. However, that didn't earn him a starting position for the 2018 World Cup, where he was just a substitute, appearing only in Game 3, and was a substitute in Euro 2020 also. So we saw that Confederations Cup was kind of a B team, and that's the only time he's been a starter. Okay, but nevertheless, a likely candidate to make the team here. We'll talk about his chances of being a starter when we get to the last part of the podcast, but let's move on to Julian Brandt. And we have him as a possible candidate because he returned after a 12-month absence in June 2021 and didn't start any of their remaining 8 games there, but subbed in for 3 and was on the bench for 5 others.
Yeah, Julian Brandt, he's a Borussia Dortmund player, where he's been for the last several years. He's 26 years old, so still kind of on the younger side. And has 38 caps to his name already, so not a bad haul, especially given that 12-month absence you mentioned.
Yeah, well, the first of his caps was in 2016, and he made the squad for the 2017 Confederations Cup. He was actually on the preliminary squad for the 2016 Euro Cup, but didn't make the cut from 27 down to 23. And in the Confederations Cup, he started game 1, but lost his starting position there, coming in only as a substitute later. So not as good a tournament as Goretzka had. For the 2018 World Cup, he too was a substitute. He came into all 3 games, but pretty late in all of them. And then he wasn't selected for the 2020 Euro Cup, so kind of on the edge of the squad here too, Connor.
Yeah, by the looks of it.
All right, well, let's summarize the position. So there's no left midfielder or right midfielder in either of the formations. If you imagine a 3-4-1-2, the 4 will be a winger in that position, or the 4-2-3-1. Kind of no outside midfielders in that formation either. So these players, the left and the right midfielders who will do soon, usually played elsewhere, usually in a more attacking role, but Goretzka is an exception there, playing as a central midfielder. We're going to talk about the attacking midfielders too a bit later, but as a left attacking midfielder, we're going to see that Thomas Müller in the Euro Cup played in that role, and Havertz also played up there once, and Sane is the main man through World Cup qualifying, but a bit of position sharing going on there. Musiala also, but we will meet those players later. Now, before we move on to right midfielders, I see I'm a bit messed up in the graphics there, so I'm just going to correct that. And we're ready to go. Do you want to take us through the right midfielder candidates?
Yeah, so we'll start with Thomas Müller, who you just mentioned. He is in our definite category, as is Leroy Sané. And then in possible but unlikely, we have Ridley Baku.
Okay, yes, and we did mention those. They seem to kind of shift around a lot here, and I'll just start by saying that Müller, despite being labelled as a right midfielder, played as a left attacking midfielder in the Euro Cup, but kind of roved around the field after that, playing sometimes on the left, sometimes on the right, and sometimes as a central attacking midfielder, even played as a centre forward once. And we have him as a definite candidate. He started 7 of the 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup. He was subbed in for 3 besides, injured for 2, and so just 1 match that he wasn't called up for.
Yeah, he's really been kind of an institution with Germany, as he has been for his club. club team Bayern Munich. He has 118 caps and 44 goals for the national team. He's 32 years old, so there's potentially more caps and goals ahead of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's been around for a long time, since the 2010 World Cup, where despite getting his first cap that year, he started all 7 games, except for one game where he was suspended, and he scored 5 of their 16 goals there, and was a starter in basically every tournament after that. 5 of their 18 goals in the 2014 World Cup there, and he won the Silver Ball Award as the second best player of the tournament. Not part of that Confederations Cup squad, which was a B team. And I don't know if you remember this in the World Cup 2018, but I think there was a bit, I think initially the manager said he wasn't going to select him. Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah, it may have been after the World Cup 2018 where Löw said that, yeah, Müller and a couple others basically we're not going to be called up again. That's changed for him since the new manager come in, but it's kind of an odd thing.
Yeah, I think Rudiger was one of those also, and maybe it was the Euro 2020 Cup then that I was thinking of. But it looks like the manager pulled back on his decision for him and one of the other players, and maybe it was Hummels that that stayed off the team. Anyway, yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, Kevin. Yeah, just kind of an odd decision to go out and then come back. I think it was reversed by Joachim Löw. But yeah, he's been part of it under Flick, who of course managed him with Bayern Munich.
Yeah, right. Okay. For the 2018 World Cup, he did start and finish games 1 and 2, but he lost his starting position there. And Euro 2020 Cup, he not only did make the team, but was a starter for most of the games there. So it seems to be going strong, scoring 3 of their goals in qualifying for this cup too. Leroy Sané we also have as a definite candidate, and actually he seems the primary left attacking midfielder for the club, whereas Müller seems to move around. Even though he is designated as a right midfielder, we have him as definite because he started 9 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, subbed in for 2 besides, and was on the bench for the 2 others, so always called up.
Yeah, he got his start with Schalke, then spent 4 years at Manchester City before leaving for Bayern Munich in 2020. He's still young, 26 years old. 47 caps and 11 goals to his name so far.
Yeah, his first cap was in 2015, and he was on the cup for the Euro 2016 squad. However, an injury kept him out of the Confederations Cup in 2017, where he was selected for the final squad. Before that injury, he required an operation on his nose. And for the 2018 World Cup, he was left off the squad, selected for the 27-man preliminary squad, but then didn't make the final cut. And do you recall the outcry? I remember there was an outcry about that.
I don't recall that so much, but it was a shock that he wasn't there at 2018.
I mean, that was during the period where he was with Manchester City, where I don't recall. I think he didn't do that well with Man City either.
Yeah, he had spells where he did well and spells where perhaps he wasn't performing up to his abilities.
Yeah, that would have been right during this period, but he's been better since the move to Bayern Munich. For the 2020 Euro Cup, he would just started and finished game 3. Otherwise, was a substitute, but he did come into the first 4 games there, and has been selected more regularly under the new manager. Finally we'll look at Ridley Baku, and we have him as possible but unlikely. He started 2 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup. One of those was as a right back, and the other one was as a right attacking midfielder, and he was subbed in for 1 game and on the bench for 1 game. However, he was not selected for 9 matches, including the last 6.
Yeah, seems to suggest then that he's not in favor currently. Another young player, so perhaps one more for the future. Just 24 years old. He plays for Wolfsburg in Germany.
Right, and he has no tournaments under his belt. His first cap was in 2020, but he didn't make the Euro Cup squad. So let's go back and summarize this position. So as far as right attacking midfielder goes, we're going to see that actually attacking midfielder Kyle Havertz played the position in the Euro Cup, although he and Thomas Müller switched sides once, making it, I think they did that specifically to confuse me, Connor. Most often it's forward Gnabry who we're going to meet, and after that. But there's been a lot of position shifting with Müller and Havertz sometimes there. And we saw Musiala, Baku, and even central midfielder Hoffman each getting a start in the position. So fairly undecided there, but looks like Gnabry to me.
Yeah, and we'll talk about him shortly, as you said.
Yeah. Yes, and let's move on to forwards, but we include attacking midfielders in the forwards. We actually should have included the left and right midfielders as far as Germany goes. But do you want to take us through the attacking midfielders?
Yeah, a couple names to go through, starting with Kai Havertz, who we have in our definite category. Also definite, we have Jamal Musiala. And then in possible, we have Julian Draxler.
Okay. Well, Kai Havertz kind of roves around the field, playing right, center, and left attacking midfielder. Not so much on the left side, where Sané and Müller seem to be the most common players. Havertz is sometimes in the forward position also. He started 7 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, and he subbed into 3 and was on the bench for 1. Ill for 1 and suspended for 1, so never not called up.
Yeah, he's 23 years old, and of course had a big move to Chelsea in 2020, moving from Bayer Leverkusen. Is just a young player. So far for the national team, he has 30 caps and 10 goals. So pretty good given his age.
Right, and his first cap was in 2018, but he doesn't seem to have been a consideration for the World Cup there. However, for Euro 2020, he was a starter, starting all 4 games and scoring 2 of their 6 goals in the Cup, and has been a fairly regular starter, or fairly regularly called up, not so regularly as a starter, but Kai Havertz, a definite candidate. Next, we have Jamal Musiala, and he too has moved around the field a bit, playing as a left attacking midfielder and right attacking midfielder, and even as a central midfielder, kind of a defensive midfielder once. He started 5 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup. He was subbed in for 5 others and on the bench for 1. And under quarantine for 2, so he also has not failed in being called up.
Yeah, Musiala is just 19 years old and 17 caps already.
Wow.
So hugely impressive. Of course, he could have been eligible for England as well, but he has chosen to represent Germany. And yeah, he's with Bayern Munich, where he's been since 2020.
Right, and I don't know that much about him, to be honest. Just 1 goal among those 17 caps. Is he more of a playmaker, or is that a bit of a disappointing stat?
Well, I think given the fact that some of those appearances have been subs, may explain that. But I think he's a bit of both. He is, kind of an attacking midfielder. So he can create, but can also get into the box and score as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think a lot is expected of him, and he seems to be reaching that potential so far.
Yeah, well, he got that goal, one of their 36 goals in World Cup qualifying there, and he was on the squad for Euro 2020. even though he got his first cap in 2021. Well, I guess the Euro Cup was in 2021. So subbed into one game there. And that's his only tournament, although this looks like it will be his second this World Cup. Julian Draxler is the possible candidate. He returned after a 17-month absence in March 2022 and started one of their remaining 6 games, was subbed in for one, and not available for the last 4 matches. And I'm just going to check while you're describing him if that was an injury as well.
Yeah, he's one of the German players who plays outside of Germany. He has been with PSG since 2017 and actually loaned to Benfica since 2022, so since this summer. Yeah, he's 29 years old, 58 caps, 7 goals. So he's been with the team since 2010, so perhaps not quite as many caps as would be expected. So he's someone, I think, who's at times kind of been around the team, if not always a firmly established member, certainly in the starting lineup.
Yeah, well, we'll look at the tournament history. I'll just say he was out with a knee injury for the June games there. And actually, if you do the tournament history, I'll check and see whether he's played for his club since.
Sure. So for World Cup 2014, he was involved, but appeared only in one game as a sub. He started a handful of games in Euro 2016, games 1, 2, 4, and 6. Started all 5 games of the 2017 Confederations Cup, where he was actually captain. And then in 2018, started games 1 and 2, but was subbed out of game 2 at halftime, and then lost his starting position after that. And finally, for Euro 2020, he was not selected for the 26-man final squad.
Yeah. As far as that Euro Cup goes, the manager, Love, said he regretted the decision, but said Draxler hadn't played regularly enough and had struggled with injuries. So it looks like for especially the late part of his career, injuries have been a problem. Mm-hmm. So I've checked on his knee problem, and he did miss the first game in September with that knee injuries, but seemed to have recovered because he played the second game, so seems to be back in action now. Okay, so he just played as a right winger once and was kind of on the fringes even before that injury. And we'll summarize the position of attacking midfielder. Again, it's not used in the formation with a 3-4-2-1, is it? But it is used in the 4-2-3-1 formation. So it wasn't a position in the Euro Cup. But in the World Cup qualifying games, it was Royce half of the time, and then Havertz, Müller, and even central midfielder Gundogan all playing one game. Havertz and Müller, when the position existed in friendlies and Nations League games, which was about half of the time. So a bit of a rotating position. It looked like Royce had it for a while, but not anymore. So it'll be interesting to see the September games, what formation they go with, and who would be in that position.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, well, we don't have any players coded as secondary strikers for Germany, and we'll move on to the forwards. And who do we have as candidates?
Yeah, as a definite candidate, we'll start with Timo Werner. In terms of likely candidates, we have 2. We have Serge Gnabry.
I knew I was saying that wrong.
And Lucas Nmecha, which I'm probably saying wrong.
2 consonants. I don't think it should be allowed.
And then in possible, we have Karim Adeyemi.
All right. Okay, let's begin then with Timo Werner. So we have, he started 10 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, subbed in for 1 game and injured for 2 others.
Yeah, Timo Werner back in Germany, back in Leipzig, who he left to join Chelsea in 2020, but moved back this summer. He actually has a pretty good goal scoring record for Germany, 24 goals in 55 appearances, all of those coming since 2017.
Yeah, the same can't be said of his time in England, but you have to give him credit for his positive attitude in the face of missing chance after chance. Hey.
Yeah, and some bad luck with offsides and VAR and other things not helping. But back in Leipzig, he seems to kind of found his confidence again, which is I'm happy to see.
Yeah, and as you say, with Germany, he doesn't have that problem. He subbed into the 2017 Confederations Cup, his first tournament, and gained a starting position there. Scored 3 of their 12 goals there and won the Golden Boot Award. And was a starter in the 2018 World Cup. However, he didn't score either of their goals there, just 2 goals for Germany in that tournament, shockingly. And in Euro 2020, he was just a substitute, coming into a couple of games and scoring no goals there either, but scored 5 of their 36 goals in qualifying. So co-top, or 3 players tied for top scorer of the on the squad. He was one of them. All right, Serge Gnabry, a likely candidate, has started 6 of their 13 games since the 2021 Euro Cup, subbed in for 2, under quarantine for 2, and out with coronavirus for 2. So just 1 match that he wasn't selected for.
Yeah, Gnabry's 27 years old. He was with Arsenal for several years, had a failed loan spell at West Brom, but his career completely turned around when he went to Werder Bremen and then Bayern Munich, of all teams, in 2017. And he's been kind of sensational for Bayern Munich ever since, as he has been for Germany. 36 caps and 20 goals. That's a heck of a return.
Yeah, we'll look at those percentages a bit later, but that is very impressive. His first cap was in 2016, but in fact, Euro 2020 was his first tournament. He wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad for the World Cup 2018. But as you say, kind of not doing well in that period of his career. For the Euro 2020, he started games 1, 2, and 3 there, and was the sole forward, lined up as a sole forward. He didn't score any of their goals in the tournament, but he got 8 of their 30 goals in qualifying there, and 5 of their 36 goals in qualifying for this cup. So a bit of a monster scorer, but seemingly more in recent times. Hey, Connor?
Yes. Yeah, where his career has really flourished.
Yeah. All right. Well, we also have Lucas Mecha as a a likely candidate. He got his first cap in November 2021 and didn't start any of the remaining 8 games, but he was subbed in for 6 of them and on the bench for 2 others.
Yeah, he's a Wolfsburg player. He actually had a spell at Manchester City, but that included some other loan spells from there. 6 caps, 0 goals since debuting in 2021, as you mentioned, and he's just 24 years old.
Right. Okay, but nevertheless, a likely candidate for this tournament, probably on the bench there. And finally, we have Karim Adeyemi. And Karim Adeyemi got his first appearance on the bench. Hang on, in September 2021. I had written it incorrectly there. He didn't start any of the remaining 12 games, but he was subbed in for 4 and on the bench for 2, and then was out with quarantine and injury for 4 matches. So, however, he was not selected for 3 of the last 4 matches. So it looked like he was kind of making inroads onto the team, but then it's always a bit confusing at the end to know what's going on there.
Yeah, he's 20 years old and just 4 caps, so pretty inexperienced player. So yeah, I guess we'll see if he's able to crack that final squad.
Yeah, but with the top team in Borussia Dortmund, and possibly we'll see him in the future. So let's summarize the forward position. In the Euro Cup, it was actually Gnabry, and he was replaced by Timo Werner in the last match there. the game 4. And Werner was the starting forward. If you recall the formation, they always have a single forward, and it was Werner throughout World Cup qualifying, except Havertz and Müller replaced him in the last 2 matches, respectively. Werner, though, came back for the friendlies and the Nations League games in June, except for one game where Havertz stepped into the position. So, unlike a lot of positions here, Connor, Timo Werner seemingly nailing down the position pretty firmly.
Yeah, interesting.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of the player-by-player discussion, and we're going to move on to a discussion of the squad. So we introduced a few points coming out of the previous podcasts that we've done, and we'll kind of detail them a bit here. Do you want to take us through them, or maybe one by one?
Yeah, I'll introduce them. And the first point we had was shocking lapses.
Do you have any in mind, Connor?
There's just the big one, which was the last World Cup.
Yeah, getting knocked out at the group stage in 2018, unable to score against South Korea in that third game.
Yeah.
Just the second time that they've been knocked out at the group stage. And then in qualifying for this cup, despite, I believe they won all of their games, but a big shock with a home loss to North Macedonia. It seems like both of those events are only possible in an alternate universe.
Yeah, Germany, kind of the model of consistency. So yeah, those lapses come in kind of quick succession. Definitely a shock to the system.
Yeah, and I'm kind of proud of the little saying I came up with for Germany while writing the notes. Germany. Oh, you're supposed to introduce it.
Sure. Germany laps but don't lull, which is very well summed up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll explain. Their only loss in qualification was that loss to North Macedonia. And Germany's, of course, known for their consistency. Prior to 2018, as I said, only knocked out once at the group stage of the World Cup, and they've always made it to the World Cup. They haven't ever suffered 2 group stage knockouts in the World Cup in a row, but in Euro Cup they have in 2000 and 2004. However, in between, they finished second in the World Cup, so we could hardly call that a lull. However, a poor showing here, given their group stage exit in 2018 and a bit of a struggling performance in the Euro 2020 with a round of 16 finish, would constitute their biggest lull. Would you say so here, or what would you call it a lull? What would they have to do to be in a lull here?
I think you're looking at probably 2 or 3 tournaments consecutively, or some big misses. So Italy would be an example of the missing out in 2 World Cups, even with a European Championship in between. But I think it's that successive failures.
Yeah.
As
by Germany's standards, though, I think failing to reach 2 World Cups in a row would actually break up the country. But by Germany's standards, I think even a round of 16 finish in the next World Cup would constitute a lull. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Germany, I think they have more kind of semi-final appearances than anyone else in terms of first, second, thirds. And you look at Euros and World Cups, they so consistently get to the last 4. So that has to be their aim at a minimum. So I guess in that regard, yeah, round of 16 or possibly even quarterfinals could be seen as a fall from their normal high standards.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's not the team podcast, but perhaps we'll discuss that a little bit more in the update podcast. We did kind of talk about it in the group podcast. Let's move on and talk about the change of the long-term manager. As we were going through the players there, Connor, did you feel that the change of manager had made a big difference?
I think kind of the Germany had a generation that won the 2014 World Cup that was kind of aging out, and some names like Schweinsteiger and Kroos, Podolski, kind of some other players had gone. So I think the task for Flick is to rebuild the team in a sense, especially given their fate at the last World Cup, and to rebuild it kind of with some younger players. So I think there are players getting a new chance. We've seen some players return after absences, and I think it's some younger players as well. Flick has a job of kind of rebuilding kind of the next great German team.
I agree with you. And actually, Love had to do the same thing in 2006. They were in a bit of as we saw, 2 Euro Cup group stage exits in a row in 2000 and 2004. So there was a bit of rebuilding in 2006. Love rebuilt the team, and now it's kind of time for rebuilding again. I would say one of the things I noticed is a bit unsettled. Sorry, I'm jumping into your role again, but maybe you can talk about it. What you felt as we were going through the player by player. The headline here is a bit of difficulty settling on the starters.
Yeah, I think in several positions they've been trying out different players, a little bit to an alarming degree. And as we said, for a long time, Germany kind of knew who its starting 11 was. I think if firm starters are to be settled upon, it looks like they're going to have to figure that out in the Cup, as they only have a couple games in September coming up and only one pre-tournament friendly scheduled.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Germany is a team and a country that kind of craves stability. On that note, I have a little quiz for you, Connor. Joachim Löw was manager for 15 years. That's got to be the longest lasting German manager, right?
I would think so, but maybe there's something in the history of East or West Germany that you can pull up.
Yeah, it's Sepp Herberger was the manager of Germany from 1936 to 1964.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, that is, hang on, that's 28 years, I think.
Wow.
So despite Love's long period, it was almost just a little more than half of Herberger's. Anyway, I mean, that does kind of show Germany's, I think they like things to be settled, consistent, predictable, and stuff like that. So I think it is a bit worrying how much rotation they've been doing in the positions, in some of the positions here.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to talk about their club affiliations. And do you want to take it away?
Yeah, overall, I mean, it's a pretty impressive list of club affiliations. The vast majority of players play in Germany. Of course, Bayern Munich is the most represented club, but you also have Dortmund, Leipzig, Mönchengladbach, Wolfsburg. So some other teams as well, but typically they're coming from teams that are top half German teams. And then on top of that, you also have a couple players playing in England. Robin Gosens is in Inter Milan. Of course, Havertz at Chelsea, Ter Stegen at Barcelona. So overall, they're massive clubs that pretty much all of these players are affiliated with.
Yeah, I mean, Germany is a very healthy league, so not like some countries where, to up your game, you kind of have to move to a bigger country. So it's fine if they're at home, and if they do go outside, it tends to be some of the biggest clubs outside of Germany.
And I think it probably benefits Germany. I mean, they have a core from Bayern Munich who know each other very well, but I think it benefits them to have players in different leagues, getting different types of experience, different styles of play, getting to learn other leagues and players. So I think the balance is very good for Germany.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about some of the stats for Germany. And we have, sorry, I just got to open the right document or consult the right document here. One of the stats we look at is kind of the total number of candidates they have on the table. It's not really a factor for Germany. The average is 50. They have 41, so a fairly small number of candidates to choose from. These would be candidates who've been kind of called up since 2020. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about settling on starters being a thing, but they're not necessarily, casting the net all that wide and pulling new players in. For the most part, they're players who are around the club, and they're just trying to find the right mix of who's going to start. So, yeah, I think that probably helps. But I think that's a finer point, is they may not have starters, but they kind of have a core group or a smaller group of players who they're using in those positions, even if we're seeing rotation.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we saw with teams that have, say, more than 60, that would be like Mexico and USA and Ecuador and Ghana. They're really going to have a headache reducing the squad to 22. Germany seem to be doing fine with these 41 candidates, which is a fairly small stable. But as you say, among those candidates, there's quite a bit of rotation. And so the next one, that one was 10 below average, but the next one, players under more serious consideration, that would be definite, likely, or possible, is 30 candidates. Any comments on that?
Yeah, 30 is more than the squad number that they can bring. So obviously there's going to be some players who've been involved who will have to be trimmed down. Yeah, for other clubs, we've seen, less than the full number. So they're probably bringing in players, but Germany might, initially have the opposite problem of cutting down players who've not been involved recently.
Well, the average is 33, and we can guess that
Okay.
some of the possible players that we've talked about won't be selected. We wouldn't be surprised by that. There's always a couple of new candidates who are in good form that they bring to the cup. In the update podcast in September, we'll probably see a couple of new names. Right now, the total number of players in the definite and likely category is 20. So from among those 30, or if we add a couple, say 33, they have to reduce it to 26, and it looks like 20 of them are already pretty much decided. Anything to add there?
No, I think you summed that up well.
Okay, well, in average age, would you guess Germany is a bit older or younger, or what do you think?
I think they're going to be pretty close to average, but
Yeah, okay, we'll take a look at it. It's actually a bit above average, 27.2, with the average being 26.5 there. And I'll just kind of cover Manuel Neuer is 36, but we do have 9 of those 30 players who are 30 years old or older, and we only have 3 who are 22 years or younger. So a bit balanced on the older side there. But do you see that as a problem?
No, I don't think so. I think they have enough young players to call on if they want, and enough talent. I mean, Germany always seems to produce talented players, but hopefully that experience, from a German perspective, will end up being an advantage. They're not old by any means, but some players with a lot of caps should help.
Yeah, you're right. Not old by any means, because after the 36-year-old goalkeeper there, the next oldest is Marco Reus at 33 and Thomas Müller. So even that's not particularly old. And as you said, with that age comes experience, and they have an average number of caps of 34.4, the average being 27.8. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that speaks to not necessarily an older team, but an experienced team. And I think that's definitely a positive. I think that works in their favor.
Yeah, total goals is shocking among those 30 players. We look at definite, likely, and possible candidates here. 180 goals. The average is 120, and if we balance that out with goals per player, the average is 3.7, and Germany's is 6. So all that basically adds up to a very high-scoring team.
Yeah, and they get goals from different positions. We mentioned one of their right backs. It may have been Hoffman, with 4 goals from 16 appearances. So they have players who can score from all over. Rudiger and Sule, both a goal threat from the back as well.
Yeah, well, we have a bit of stats. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but we did notice that Müller and Timo Werner's scoring percentage were quite good. So I'll just tell you, Thomas Müller is 37%, Timo Werner 43%, and Serge Gnabry, even though it's over a fewer number of games, 20 goals in 36 games, a whopping 55%.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then we have a lot of players who are above 20%. There are some teams who don't even have any players with 20%. And as you say, some of their more defensive players have percentages 10 to 20%, which is quite good. So goals from all over the field, as you say. Okay, well, let's move on from that and look at a couple of player issues. And do you want to introduce them?
Yeah, so starting in defense, we have Germany has to settle, I guess, on a central defense and formation.
Right, so sometimes it's a two-man central defense and sometimes a three-man. It alternated throughout, especially at the end, alternating from one to the other in the last two friendlies and the Four Nations League games. I'm not sure myself. Maybe you have an opinion whether it's strategic or is it on this kind of indecision or perhaps based on who's available, Connor?
Yeah, it might be a bit of based on who's available and based on the opponent. Yeah, I think they'll probably, as they did with the last tournament, probably pick a formation and stick with it. But yeah, maybe there is a bit more flexibility. But I think for game one, they'll need to obviously know what formation they're going to set up with and who's going to fill the roles.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's kind of worked out in the group stage of the cup. Right now, it seems like Rudiger and Sule is the most likely pairing with Kehrer as the most likely third. But there's been a lot of rotation, and there's no pair or grouping that's been consistent enough, really, for players to get used to their partners in the positions. So a bit of an issue in several positions, really.
All right, next,
yeah, go ahead.
We have Hoffman as either right back or right winger.
Yeah, we saw in the Euro Cup, Kimmich was there, but you told us why he was more of a central midfielder under this manager. So it seems to be settling on Hoffman, or it seemed to be that way during World Cup qualifying. But then three players started the position over the last Four Nations League games. So it was Hoffman twice, but it seems a bit up in the air. All right, let's move on to midfield.
Sure. Kimmich seems most likely to start there, but we'll see whether it'll be Gundogan or Goretzka alongside him.
Yeah, I don't think we need to say much more than that. The position's a little bit unsettled. We may get a bit more light shed on this in the September games. If you have nothing to add, Connor, we can move on to attack.
Yeah, and the first one I'll mention there is whether it'll be Sané or Musiala as the left attacking midfielder, two Bayern teammates, I should mention.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Towards the end, they shared this position. It was kind of Sané quite a bit at first. Müller was over there too. Sané seems the more likely, but Musiala seems to be being used a lot. So they may kind of look for a place for him to come into.
Yeah, next we have who the right attacking midfielder will be.
Yeah, more unsettled than the left side. Gnabry and Havertz and Müller and several others, including central midfielder Hoffman, have been seen starting on that side. So that needs to be pinned down perhaps a little more.
And then as will a central attacking midfielder, and part of that is whether they'll use one, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. Several players stepping into the role. Marco Reus actually more than any other single player, but he seems like he won't make the squad. So probably Havertz and Müller. They have these Havertz, Müller, and Musiala kind of roving attacking midfielders there.
Yeah, and then finally, will it be Werner as starting center forward?
All right. Well, part of that roving attacking midfielder is that Gnabry, Havertz, and Müller have all stepped into the centre forward role, but it is one of the more settled positions for the team. All right, let's move on to look at some of the new players on the squad.
All right. we'll just mention these by name, I believe, unless there's anything else you want to mention, Kevin.
I might mention a couple of things, but we've gone through them in the player by player, so it's just a review at this stage.
Yeah, so for definites, we have Thilo Kehrer and David Raum.
Okay, both of those are defenders. Thilo Kehrer, a central defender who I think has played on the right a couple of times. David Raum seems to be established as the left back or left winger, depending on the position.
Yeah. And then we have Nico Schlotterbeck, as well as Lucas Mecha, who we both listed as possible.
Yeah, they're both young. Generally, a lot of these players are young, but we may have older players who are newly joining the team. Schlotterbeck is a central defender, and Lucas Mecha a forward, though usually used as a substitute rather than a starter.
Yeah, and I think I said possible, but those two are likely.
Right.
But in possible, we do have two names. Those are Oliver Baumann and Karim Adeyemi.
Right, and we said it in the play-by-play. Oliver Baumann may have come in as a replacement. I'd be a bit surprised to see him selected for the squad, given the quality of candidates Germany has in goal. Karim Adeyemi, yeah, a forward. Oliver Baumann is 32 years old, by the way, so just new to the squad, but not a young player. Karim Adeyemi, in contrast, is just 20 years old.
And then the final name on this list is Ridley Baku, who we have as possible but unlikely.
Yeah, he looked like he was making a bit of an inroad there during the period that we talked about, but ended up only starting 2 games and not called up as much as it looked like he was going to be. So that is new players. You can see they're all kind of in light grey there, which indicates that they have never been in a tournament before. Let's move on to injuries.
All right. First, actually, the only name we have to really mention is Lucas Klosterman.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions. I think we had a question mark about Marco Reus, but he was back in action. The players that we had questions about look like it's not an issue. However, for Lucas Klosterman, coded as a right back, but also has played on the right side of that 3-man defense. Out with a ruptured ligament from mid-August with an unknown return date. So I don't know how long a ruptured ligament goes on for, but to me that looks like it could impact his World Cup chance.
Yeah, not looking great for him.
Yeah, again, maybe we can update this in the podcast on any new injuries that happen between then and now. But we're going to finish this section with notable absences.
Yeah, so these are people that seem to be off the squad. So in goal, we have Bernd Leno.
Right, and you talked a bit in the play-by-play podcast, maybe a bit about form there.
Yeah. And then other players who've been with the team, kind of bigger names, Mats Hummels, Emre Can, and Tony Kroos.
Right, and we won't go into detail on these because we did do so in the play-by-play podcast, but it's Mats Hummels, a central defender who I think he was the one left out of Euro 2020. No, he actually did play in Euro 2020, so I was wrong there. Emre Can, just 28 years old, but hasn't been called up since the Euro Cup in 2021. And same with Tony Kroos, although he did announce his retirement. We also have some players. We do have some listeners who kind of follow teams from World Cup to World Cup. So we're just going to mention some names of key kind of World Cup players who are no longer with Germany.
Yeah, a couple of big names. Jerome Boateng, as well as Sami Khedira, the two most notable.
All right. So yeah, kind of as you mentioned, the generation that Joachim Löw built in 2006. A lot of them retired before this tournament, but there is some rebuilding for the new manager to do. But now we're going to finish the podcast finish the mediacast by going through the names that we've listed and try to predict who's going to be starters. We won't talk too much about substitutes because anyone who's in the definite or likely candidate category who isn't nominated as a starter will probably be a substitute. So let's begin with the manager, and we have. Do you want to take us through the candidates, Connor?
Yeah, I mean, Joachim Löw was a previous manager, but firmly in there now is Hansi Flick.
Right, he hasn't been through a tournament before, but we doubt that they would change their manager at this point. Let's move on to goalkeepers, and perhaps we'll name the definite and likely candidates as we go through.
Yeah, so we have Neuer as a definite candidate, Manuel Neuer, and then likely we have Kevin Trapp.
All right, do you see a starter there?
It may be his last major tournament, maybe not, but I see Manuel Neuer still as the starter, as he has been for many tournaments now.
Yeah, I think so, and has played most of their games. The substitutes are a bit more interesting, but we're not really going to do that here, but probably Trapp will be among them. Central defenders, who do we have?
Indefinite, we have Niklas Süle and Thilo Kehrer. And then in likely, we have Antonio Rudiger, as well as Nico Schlotterbeck.
Right, and again, that kind of comes down to whether it's going to be a two-man or a three-man. I actually think myself that Niklas Süle and Antonio Rudiger would be part of the two-man defense. And then Thilo Kehrer added if it's a three-man defense. What do you think?
I agree entirely with that. Yeah, I think Süle and Rudiger are the most likely starters.
Right, but we are oversimplifying it a bit there because several players, even right back Klosterman, has come into the position. So it's quite possible that other names will show up. I'm not willing to say Thilo Kehrer will be a starter there. How about left back?
We only have one definite candidate, and that is David Raum.
Right, he's been pretty consistent, either as a left back in a four-man formation or a left winger in the three-man defense. I think he's the starter there.
Yeah.
We have right backs.
Yeah, we have Josh Kimmich and Jonas Hoffman as definite. And then Lucas Klosterman is likely, though he does have that injury doubt hanging over him.
Right. Well, we did see that Joshua Kimmich actually has moved to central midfield, so I'm going to actually move him right here. Do you think he'll be a starter?
I do think Kimmich will start, but in central midfield, as you've identified. And so that leaves me feeling confident that Jonas Hoffman will be the right back.
Again, yeah, maybe a bit oversimplified here because we have seen other people in the position. Excuse me, and we have seen Hoffman play as an attacking midfielder, but I'd say, confident enough that he'll be there. Defensive midfielders, it looks like we don't have any definite or possible candidates there.
No, not in the defensive midfield position. But we do in central midfield. We have Joshua Kimmich, who you mentioned, as well as Ilkay Gundogan indefinite.
Yes. And do you see Gundogan as a starter? I'm going to actually move Leon Goretzka up to here because we have him as a likely candidate as a left midfielder, but actually he's been playing in central midfield. Do you see Gundogan or Goretzka as definite starters?
I think as we identified, it'll be Kimmich with either Gundogan or Goretzka, and I favor Gundogan in that role.
Okay,
yeah.
I've actually started using yellow to identify kind of an alternating players, because there are some teams that kind of alternate on purpose even.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to left wingers. We saw the defensive, the right back and left back moving up to there, but we do have one candidate there, Marco Reus, as a possible. So I think we go right to the attacking end of the field with the left and right midfielders.
Yes. In left midfielders, we don't have any definite or likely candidates, but in right side we do, where we've identified Thomas Muller and Leroy Sané.
Right, and I think I'm going to move Leroy Sané over to the left because that's primarily where he has played, and I'm gonna nominate him as a starter quite boldly because he has played there the most.
Yeah, I think he faces some threats, notably from Musiala or possibly even Havertz, but I'm going to agree with you and say that he would be starting in the left kind of attacking midfield position.
Yeah, I would say I'm like 80% confidence on that. Right midfielder, I think Thomas Muller will be a starter, but he could almost start in any position there on the attacking end of the field. Any opinion there?
I think they'll find room for him. Personally, I think if they use a 4-2-3-1, Muller will be in kind of that attacking mid position behind the forward. If not, I see him on the right side. But I think they will find room for him to start on the field.
Yeah, I like the way you put it there. I mean, sometimes they put him as forward to find room for him. And speaking of players nominated as forwards, do you want to take us through the main candidates?
Yeah, so starting with attacking midfielders, we have Kai Havertz and Jamal Musiala in our definite category.
Any starters between those two?
Possible, but I actually think we'll have to go to the forwards for me to find who the starters
okay.
might be.
I'm actually tempted to say Kai Havertz again, kind of like Muller, somewhere up there. Would you disagree?
I think it's possible. He is a versatile player. Looking at forwards, we have Timo Werner as definite and Serge Gnabry as likely. And I actually favor probably Werner up top and Gnabry on the right-hand side, which does kind of force Havertz out. But I do agree with you that they might want to find a place for him.
I kind of agree with you. Actually, Gnabry has been playing on the... Sorry, I'm going to just cough here. I do agree with you that Gnabry is actually more of a starter than Havertz for me. He's been fairly regular on the right side. Maybe I'll put Havertz as an alternating, although I don't know how they're going to fit him in.
I think over the course of at least 3 group stage games, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Havertz start at least one of those games.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And that's kind of what the yellow means, is that they will be a starter, but perhaps not the regular starter. Would you see any other players, just in finishing here, that you would change from green to yellow? Green being a starter kind of every game, with yellow being a sometimes starter.
If any, I see perhaps Leroy Sané and Musiala being a little bit interchangeable. It may come into club form or just preference. I think they'll both get starts. I do favor Sané as I think you do, but Musiala, he's young, but he certainly could start.
Yeah, well, I did say 80% with Sané, which is a little less than being a nailed-on starter. I guess we can look at the September games and see if that sheds any more light on the matter. Yeah. But that brings us to the end of this media cast.
Yeah, so keep in mind we will be doing an update as new information comes out, and that will probably be in earlier mid-November when teams will be publishing squad lists.
Right, and keep an eye on us at soccerphiles Canada. That's soccerphiles with a PH in the middle and an S at the end. And our website is soccerphiles.captivate.fm. And check out the show notes. We've been improving those. Links to the website and previous podcast series and all sorts of stuff in there. And thank you for listening. Thanks for joining, Connor.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.